everyone. My name is Emily Pennington. I'm the content manager for Park Street, and I head up our educational programming. Today's conversation is all about racial equity and justice. You'll likely remember that in May this year, the death of George Floyd brought about a massive shift in the conversation on race in the United States. There have been a number of webinars and panels on this topic, but what I thought was missing from the conversation is how independent spirits brands owners can join this movement for racial equity and justice. So today I brought in the one and only Fawn Weaver, the CEO of Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, and her bio is immensely impressive, but I'm just going to touch on a few highlights here. She's been a serial entrepreneur for 25 years, which includes a stint as a partner in a restaurant in LA, a New York Times bestselling author, the founder of the Nearest Green Foundation, and in addition to running Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, she has also formed an alliance with the Jack Daniel's distillery to create the Nearest and Jack Advancement Initiative to elevate people of color within the industry. So thanks for being here, Fawn.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
So first of all, just how are you in 2020?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. You will, one thing about me is I'm going to find the gem in everything. I am going to find the silver lining in everything. And I think that the creativity, the ability to create comes from very challenging times for those who focus. And so I'm doing great.
All right, good. I'm glad to hear it. So, honestly, I think most people are probably familiar with Uncle Nearest. But let's just, for those people, this will be airing all over the world. So maybe for those people who don't, can you give just a little bit of background on how you started the brand?
Yeah, so Uncle Nearest, his legal name is Nathan Green, but he called himself Nearest, and all of his children and grandchildren, even on their legal documents, referred to him as Nearest. So we just referred to him by his nickname, Nearest Green. And he was the first known African American master distiller. And he was not only the teacher and the mentor of a young Jack Daniel, but also the first master distiller for Jack Daniel Distillery. And so all of this really came to light with a lot of research that we brought forth in 2017. We've been able to sort of piece the story of Nearest Green together and to be able to share that with the world. So until now, every single American whiskey bourbon brand, those who they've been representing have all been white. So this is the outlier, to say the least. But Nearest Green just happens to be the only African American distiller we know by name. All of the rest, unfortunately, somehow are in record books somewhere that no one has been able to uncover. But we were able to do it, at least for Nearest.
Okay. So, one of the reasons I wanted you specifically for this panel is not just because you created a brand and you're Black, but because there is a cause deeply tied to everything you do with this whiskey.
Yeah.
So, can you share some of the, projects and causes that are tied to maybe, racial justice?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's very challenging in our industry overall, because it has for so long been so white. I think that the conversation is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. They fumble over their words and a lot. And and there is truly a lack of understanding that George Floyd is not what caused the reckoning that we are seeing. It is Ahmaud Arbery, who was then followed by George Floyd, who was then followed by Breonna Taylor, back to back to back. And so you have this moment in time in which three things were amplified simultaneously. This isn't new. What happened to George or Ahmaud or Breonna is not new. What is new is that it being amplified so close together. And people deciding, okay, no matter what race, no matter what background, this is our equal problem. We have to be able to solve this together. And so for us, Nearest Green Foundation actually preceded Uncle Nearest, the brand. And so before there was a bottle sold, we were already paying for all of Nearest's descendants who were in college for their tuition, for their books, for anything related to their education. And that came from looking at the young people in this generation that's in Nearest's family, and me being able to look them in the eye and realize that they didn't understand the legacy of excellence they came from. I think the thing that people miss is that for every heritage except for ours, you can trace back pretty definitively to your great, 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 great grandparents and know what type of lineage you came from. All you'd have to do is ask your grandparents to name their parent, and ask their parents to name. It is documented, and so you're able to truly be a whole being. And I think truly the only way that I can best explain this is consider a person who is adopted very young.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how much those adopted parents love that adopted child. When that child turns 18, they are going to look for their birth mother. And that is a natural reaction because you know that there's something missing. So every African American knows we were brought here, we were essentially dropped here, and we do not have roots and we do not have connections to those that are our parents of sort. And so you're looking at a group of people that feel adopted, and they want to know, where do we really come from? What is that legacy that's out there that I don't know about? There's always a wondering when you are African American of, what am I disconnected from? Because we weren't just brought here and families allowed to remain together enslaved. We were brought here and then the mothers and the fathers were separated intentionally. Siblings were separated intentionally. And so you've got an entire group of people that every single time something like this happens, it really brings back to the forefront this sense of not belonging. So that's the piece that I think that ends up getting missed. If you're not African American, if you're not Black, that's the piece that is missing, because there's no way for you to understand it because you don't have an ability to feel it. Yeah. Right. And so when you start looking at what can we do individually, not just the spirits industry, what can everyone in this country, is who I'm dealing with. Every country has their own individual type of challenge that's like this, but for our country, the question becomes, how do we make a difference? And I knew that Nearest Green, immediately following the Civil War, was the wealthiest African American in the area, and he was wealthier than a lot of his white neighbors. I knew that his children, to look at photos of them, you would think that they were elite society forever. You would have no idea that they were the children or the grandchildren of a formerly enslaved man. And they owned, full city blocks here in Lynchburg and land everywhere, and had their own businesses and successful businesses, even outside of Tennessee, when one went to Indiana and started a wildly successful business there. And so when knowing that is their legacy, but then watching them kind of shrug their shoulders about it, what became clear is there was a disconnect between the current generation and Nearest's generation, his children, his grandchildren. So the question was, how do we bring those two together? And the best way to do it is through higher education and giving them the ability to see themselves in a place of greatness and giving them the tools to get there. And so when we began, most of the kids were, well, not most of them, but several were, city college or local college, not many universities. But once the kids that were in the 9th grade and the 10th grade realized, wait a minute, our education is already paid for. I need to start hustling in high school so I can get into whatever school I want, because why work that hard if you don't think you can pay for college? If you don't think you're going to be able to afford college, why would you work so hard in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade if you're going to get out and have the same, job that someone who doesn't go to college has? And so that was my commitment to them very early on. We're going to change the trajectory of this one lineage so that it all returns back to the way that it was when Nearest and his children and his grandchildren were holding up that legacy of excellence. And that's where we started. So from that point forward, it has always been about, where can we be helpful? And how can we as individuals be hopeful and helpful? And so one of the things I recognized coming into this industry, beside the fact that it was white,
Mhm.
which I didn't know before I came into it. That was kind of a shocker for me.
So
Uh,
it was wider than other industries that you've worked in?
well, it's wider than every industry.
Mhm.
I don't know of another industry that is this white as American spirits. I mean, the distributors, I can, and I've done GSMs for tons of them. You walk into the distributorship, and the whole room of 100 people are white. Like the whole room.
Mhm.
You're not going to find that anywhere. You're not going to find it in technology. You're not going to find that anywhere.
Mhm.
The spirits industry was very unique to that, at least my experience coming into it. And I didn't come in to make history. Hell, I didn't know I was going to make history. It was after I came in and I realized that not very many people looked like me, that what I began focusing on, in addition to building the brand and cementing the legacy of Nearest Green, was also working on figuring out, okay, how do we fix this? Do we even know what the issue is? Do we know why this industry is so damn white? You know? And so that was the part we had to figure out first to try to find solutions for it.
Wait, so what did you learn? Are you doing that process now, or are you trying to initiate that?
Oh no, I am very comfortable that I understand specifically for American whiskey. Now, I haven't focused on any other area. I think rum, because of the nature of the rum, you really don't have that challenge with rum, but here in America we don't have a whole heck of a lot of rum. So for the most part you're going to Barbados, the Caribbean, you're going to Mauritius, and that you're already going to places where you have so many people of color that are in that industry. But I think that when it comes to American whiskey, uh, there are a few challenges that I have concluded in being in this industry. The first is we don't really get resumes from people of color. Now, as Uncle Nearest has grown, as it's become more successful, as I've been out here talking about this, we're starting to get more resumes. But I can say I've gotten more resumes from people of color in the last 2 to 3 months than I did in the first 3 years of our company's history. Easy. And so I do think that one of the things we have to do with the American whiskey industry is understand and acknowledge that it was started with whites and with enslaved people. And by it being started, but only one of those groups being acknowledged as the heritage has continued on, as the history has continued on, then African Americans are not going to feel welcome into this industry because it would feel as though we were intentionally left out. And if you, I mean, I can go up through Kentucky, and I have no doubt that most of those distilleries had Black distillers, but we don't know any of their names. They had Black people rolling the barrels and charring the barrels and making the whiskey and bottling the, we don't know any of their names. And so for African Americans, that's hard to feel included in, right? So that's your first piece. Then just in general, African Americans aren't drawn to industries where our ancestors did not have a choice. That is cleaning houses, that is American whiskey, tobacco, cotton. You're not going to really see us in those industries, and there's a damn good reason for it. So we already have those things. And then African Americans as a group of people are deeply religious. Now, whether or not we actually follow, uh, because it's either Christianity
Sure.
or it's Muslim for the most part. And both of them, if we followed the tenets, we would be acting a whole hell of a lot different right now. But that being said, understanding that most of us grew up Christian or Muslim, both of which the pastors and the ministers railed against alcohol,
Huh.
the spirit industry, and specifically whiskey, because it's our native spirit. So we already have those three challenges coming into this. And then we've never seen Black people in leadership in this industry. And so you're not going to fill a pipeline, get people to come in at entry level positions if they don't see that they can reach the top. Who would do that? And so those are the four challenges that we had to set out to really fix. We
Sure.
had to begin to make this industry cool. And that doesn't mean it's just me. That means every Black person who is in this industry has to come out forward and begin talking about their experience in the industry. And then African Americans in leadership in this industry, every single one that I know intentionally stays behind the scenes. And I have the conversations with them and go, guys, it'd be a lot easier if you came out front and then
Yeah.
more people could see. But a lot of them, it is that challenge of you grow up from a deeply religious background, and you're not really interested in being at the family reunion and going, yeah, I slang whiskey like that. That just isn't something that
Yeah.
your family is proud of. Father, I'm the child of two teetotalers. And so my father has passed away. My mother, when I began working on this, her response was, baby, I'm so proud of you and what you've done for this man and his family, but I sure wish he made lemonade. And she holds true to that even to this day with all that we're doing. She's still trying to wrap her mind around how this could be good. And that's not something that is just unique to me. That's going to be a lot of African Americans. And
Yeah.
so the question was, how do we overcome all of that? And it is, kind of, I think my former pastor, when I was growing up, he used to say, you can't ripen a peach with a blowtorch. And so we have to take all of these steps, all of these small steps in order to really uh, improve this industry. But we have to be determined to do it. And we've got to be determined to do it collectively. It can't be, the Black founder is the one who's trying to do all this. That's not possible. It's something that has to be done collectively. And what I'm really proud with this industry and what I am seeing is how so many have come to the forefront to say, we recognize it's a problem. We've been a part of the problem. It's our job to help fix the problem. And that's what we're all working together to do.
Okay, so that blends seamlessly into the direction that I want to go in because at Park Street University, almost everything we do is geared towards small and new, up and coming brand owners, right? And we've heard so much from the big, giant international corporations, but I want to talk to the little guys about how they can get in on this movement and frankly why they should get in on this movement, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a couple of questions here. So a lot of these I'm going to pretend that I'm a small brand owner, right?
Mhm.
So what are some of the ways that I can create a safe space for my employees of color?
Well, the first thing you have to do is understand the issues a little better and really don't try to talk about it until you've listened enough to understand. And I think that if you are not surrounding yourself with people of color and putting yourself in their shoes, it is impossible for you to ever get to that place. If you're sitting kind of with, if the only place you see Black people is in the workplace, that's a problem,
Yeah.
period. And so you have to figure out, how do you surround yourself with a more diverse group of people? That's the simplest thing that you can do outside of the workplace, because then you're able to have those conversations with the walls down. You're not in a work environment trying to get to understand what Black people are experiencing in a work environment is a futile exercise. You have to figure out how to befriend people that don't look like you. And that is where you have the conversations to begin with. That is where you listen to begin with. And then you're able to take that stuff back into the workplace and figure out based on your team members that are there. But if you look around and every single person looks like you, that's a problem. I don't care what your race
Yeah.
is. If
Yeah.
everybody around you looks like you, that's where you start.
Okay. All right. Um, do you have any like key policies that you think small brands can implement around racial equity and diversity?
I don't know that I have any key I don't know that I have any key policies. So for my company, what I determined from the very beginning is that I wanted to build a team that was reflective of America, that really fit the population of America in terms of gender. So our company is 50-50 women and men. And in terms of people of color, that it was representative of America. And so that means that we've got a big old giant rainbow in our company. I mean, America is still 60% white. That is consistent in my company. But the other 40% represents the other 40% that are represented in America, although I need more Latinas. That's just a whole personal problem. I've been encouraging going, guys, if you know someone who's experienced that is a Latinx, I need them because I'm looking at this and we are not where we need to be. But even with me having 40%, more than 40% people of color, and that being a focus of mine, I'm still looking within that and saying, where are we under indexing? Do we not have enough of? And I think that that's something that has been a part of our success for a lot of these brands, especially the smaller brands. People will try to convince you to focus on a set demographic. And a lot of times the demographic, for instance, if it's American whiskey, 78% of the consumer of American whiskey is white male. And so a lot of people fall into this trap of putting all of their focus and energy and attention toward that group because they're 78%. But the reality is that 22% still represent a lot of people, and they represent a lot of bottles that are sold. And the more we focus on that 22%, the larger that group will become within our industry. And that is beneficial to everyone.
Sure. Okay, so something that I often wonder, kind of related to this topic, is do you have any thoughts on the line between, meeting sort of a quota and amplifying voices of your people of color, even, your LGBTQ audience, but not making them feel like a checked box?
Yeah. Well, I think that that has everything to do with why you're doing it. If you're doing it to meet a quota, they're going to know that. They're going to feel that. If you're doing it because you said within our company, we want our company to look like America because we want to be able to reach all of America, that's very different than checking a box. So for instance, African Americans are 13.9% of the population. In my company, it's about 25%. That isn't because I was, looking to specifically have more African Americans. Than the people that I hired are incredible. And so that's just the way that it fell. For my Latino population in America, it's 24%, I think. And in my company, it's less than 5%. I look at that and I say, that's a problem. However, when I'm getting the resumes in and I'm interviewing people, if it is not a Latinx person who rises to the top as being the best, I'm still going to hire the best. And for me, it is a matter of giving everybody an equal shot. And I think that when you give everyone an equal shot, then you end up with a diverse pool of people in your company.
Sure. Okay. All right. So we've talked about how to create a diverse workforce, but what about, let's say you have one now, right? Do you need a discrimination policy? And if so, what does a good one look like?
Yeah, again, that I think, especially for smaller companies, the person who's leading it just needs to have a good heart.
Yeah.
Like that, and that needs to come through because discrimination policies mean about as much as a diversity and inclusion department that doesn't really do anything.
Sure.
All of that stuff feels very check the box.
Mhm.
The question for a person of color is do I feel equal? Do I feel like I have the same opportunities? Do I feel like you care about me? That's the part that needs to matter. And you're not going to get that in a statement.
Yeah.
It has to be embodied in the culture of the company.
Okay.
You don't
So,
need a statement.
so what most of this boils down to is you have to believe in this stuff, right?
You have to believe in it, and it's got to be from the top. All of this trickles down from the top. So if the person at the top has surrounded themselves with people who just look like them, and they are not taking the time to put their self in the shoes of people who do not look like them, who do not have the background of them, I don't care how many beautiful policies and statements get written up. The people that are there are going to feel it. They're going to know that you really don't care. and they are going to continue to react to that feeling.
Sure. Okay. All right. Are there companies that you can think of, whether in spirits or out, that are really getting this right? Because there's a lot of performative allyship, but are there ones
Yeah.
that you could point to that maybe can be studied or you know looked at as an example?
Yeah, I think we all have to work pretty hard at it. I think that the social media folks are doing pretty good at bringing in a lot of folks, but I quite frankly have not studied what other industries are doing. My focus is on what we're able to do in our industry, because my belief is if an industry that began as white and as white male as ours did, if we can figure this out in our own industry, then others will be looking at us. And that is what I'm more focused on. That is what I care about more.
Okay. So are there any examples then within spirits of a company that you think not yet?
Mm-mm. Nope, not yet.
All right. So we have some work to do, people.
We've got a lot of work to do. Yeah. I think one of the things, Diageo did something interesting a few years ago, is they came out and they said by a certain time, I believe it was the CEO said, by a certain time, our company will be 50% women. That is what it is. And it's 50% women in America. That's where it needs to be. And just by setting a goal that big and really having a mandate that you've got to take every single woman application you see that comes through, you take that very seriously. If they're not the best person for the job, then okay. But you must really focus on that piece of it. And I think that whatever their goal was that they set to have it by a certain year, they met it, I think, 2 years early. So I do think that we can use that as sort of an example for what everyone else can do, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. I think if they actually state it publicly and give it a deadline,
Yeah.
they'll figure out how to get it. They'll
Just
figure out how to get it done.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, what about resources for people who are, or for brand owners who are at the point where they're like, yes, I believe in this. I just need to figure out how. Any resources you would suggest?
When you say how, what are you referring to?
Well,
How what?
there's all kinds of decisions that have to be made once you state that your larger policy of diversity within your company, right?
Hmm.
And even down to just sort of like hiring, we're going from a point you do believe it, right? So
Right.
there are still decisions to be made on hiring and discrimination and even like mentorships within your company. um
Yes. Well, I think you kind of got to go back to when they are not at work and they believe it.
mhm,
Who are they around? Because the people they are around when they're not at work can lead them.
mhm,
So the reason our team is so diverse is I literally went to our team and said, I am not getting any applications from people of color. I need your help. Who are the best people you've come across in this industry that are, and then I went and poached them. That is, so I think, but the thing is that if you don't have any folks you're able to have that conversation, then there's a very basic step you have to do first, which is find some people who don't look like you and cultivate a relationship, because they will be able to help you to figure this piece out if you truly are committed to doing it.
sure. So learning and listening, basically.
Whole lot of learning and listening.
Okay. All right. Then I think that just about wraps it up. Fawn, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and being out there doing the work, because you don't have to, but we are so grateful, both personally and, Park Street University, that you're out there doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. I appreciate you for having the conversation and wanting to have the conversation. So I hope we have more, just worldwide, more people have the conversation, because we all have to work together to figure this out. Every country has a unique circumstance that's going to be different from the next. But the through line is always going to be, do we see each other as equal? And that's where we start. That's where, like, no excuses, no prefaces, just bottom line. Do I see you is as being as good as me? And any person who cannot answer that question is yes, with any person who doesn't look like them. That's where we start.
Sure, sure. Well, wonderfully said. And I hope, our plan is to continue this sort of conversation and movement. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you, Emily.
All right. Take
Cheers.
care. Cheers.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you found this conversation useful. If you want to see more of our videos this week, check them out on Global Bar Week, or you can go to parkstreetuniversity.com and see our whole collection.